After centuries of warfare, Gondolin stood alone as the last elven city of Beleriand, and thus became the singular focus of Morgoth, who already learned its general whereabouts through his former prisoner, Húrin Thalien, but learned more about the realm and made specific plans for an invasion after capturing Maeglin, the disillusioned, half-Noldor, half-Sindar nephew of High King Turgon. Leaving the city to search for metals in the mountains, Maeglin was captured by orcs, and thus made a deal, promising to reveal details about Gondolin's location and help them conquer the city in exchange for sparing his life and arranging his marriage to Idril, his cousin, the daughter of Turgon, despite the fact marriages between close kin were shunned, and she was already married to Tuor, a human hero made lord of the city. Though Idril was unaware of his betrayal, she nonetheless worried about the safety of their people and made a secret emergency escape plan, constructing tunnels in case of emergency. Her fears then proved justified during the Gate of Summer festival, when Morgoth launched a full-scale invasion, sending orcs, wolves, and Balrogs riding dragons to destroy the last Noldor realm. Among the many heroic feats during the fall of Gondolin, some of the most impressive included Rogg's defense of the Northern Gate, where the Lord of the Hammer of Wrath gave a passionate speech, inspiring his army to tear their way through the enemy, making it beyond city limits before they were surrounded and killed. Then there was Ecthelion, Lord to the House of the Fountain, who personally slew 3 Balrogs in defense of the Southern Gate, while his army killed more orcs than in any battle before. When dragons arrived, they retreated to the Square of the King, where Ecthelion remained to hold off the enemy so others could escape. Though he was already wounded, losing his shield and the use of his left arm, he fought Gothmog, the Lord of Balrogs, in single combat, and soon lost the use of his right hand and sword. Valiant to the end, Ecthelion charged forth and drove his spiked helm into Gothmog, causing them both to topple into the Fountain of the King where they died. As for High King Turgon, he oversaw and directed his forces from the Tower of the King until realizing victory was impossible, at which point he ordered all survivors to evacuate the city while he remained with the House of the King, fighting until the end. Though they put up a valiant defense, dragons eventually knocked over the tower, crushing the High King beneath. After facing off against and defeating the traitorous armies of Maeglin, Tuor joined his wife Idril to help evacuate their people through secret tunnels, aided in their efforts by Lord Glorfindel of the House of the Golden Flower. Yet when they were waylaid outside the city by an enemy army, Glorfindel lost his life battling a Balrog on a mountain cliff, knocking him over the side only to be dragged down by his hair, both falling to their deaths. Aided further by eagles who helped hold off the orcs, Tuor, Idril, and their young son Eärendil led survivors south to seek refuge near the mouths of Sirion. A few years later, Tuor, joined by his wife Idril, embarked upon his lifelong ambition of sailing across the Sea to Valinor, and though neither were ever seen again, some stories say they completed the journey, and Tuor, despite being human, was treated as an elf and granted immortality so he might live alongside his wife in the Undying Lands. Regardless, with Tuor and Idril gone, leadership of the refugees living near the mouths of Sirion fell to their son Eärendil, who married Elwing, daughter of King Dior, thereby uniting the half-elven lines to produce 2 sons, Elrond and Elros. An avid sailor seeking to learn the fate of his parents, Eärendil often voyaged across the sea, leaving Elwing in charge of their people, and it was during one such occasion in 538 FA that a final great tragedy befell them when the Sons of Feanor arrived with the last of their followers, demanding the surrender of the Silmaril they held. Refusing to give in, the Sons of Feanor committed the 3rd kinslaying, considered the cruelest of all because they slaughtered many defenseless refugees. Though Círdan and Gil-galad sent reinforcements from the Isle of Valar, the battle was over by the time they arrived. Despite losing Amrod and Amras, the last Sons of Feanor emerged victorious, but once again it was all for naught, as Elwing threw herself and the Silmaril into the sea rather than face capture. Ever a friend to the children of Eru, the Vala Ulmo saved Elwing from drowning and granted her the ability to transform into a white bird, allowing her to fly through the air with the Silmaril until finding her husband's ship. Transforming back into a woman, she explained all that occurred, and after realizing Beleriand was entirely lost, they sailed west to Valinor, where they might beg assistance from the Valar, who were now the only hope for saving Middle-earth from the Dark Lord. A great mariner, Eärendil navigated his way to Valinor, and became the first known mortal to march upon the Undying Lands. Aware he came for selfless reasons, bore a precious Silmaril, and was the descendant of an important bloodline, Manwë and the Valar did not punish him for violating their laws by coming to these lands, and even agreed to raise armies to once again wage war against their old adversary Morgoth. Assembling a great host, their warriors consisted of the Valar, Maiar, Vanyar elves, and those Noldor who remained behind when Fëanor and Fingolfin journeyed to Middle-earth. The Teleri elves also contributed to the mission by providing ships for the voyage east, but refused to fight as they still resented the Noldor for slaughtering their people in the first kinslaying. Reaching Middle-earth in 545 FA, the armies of the Valar were joined by the surviving elves of Beleriand as well as the remaining men of the West, while many Easterlings fought for the Dark Lord, whose armies grew vast after conquering nearly all of Beleriand. In addition to possessing great legions of orcs, there were Balrogs, serpent dragons, wolf riders, werewolves, and other wicked creatures like trolls, a new form of life made in mockery of the Ents. Engaging in the War of Wrath, a long, bloody 40-year struggle, the host of the Valar eventually reached Angband, causing Morgoth to unleash his winged dragons, the last, deadliest weapon in his arsenal. Quickly devastating the armies of the Valar. For the first time, defeat seemed like a possibility, until Eärendil flew into battle aboard a skyship, accompanied by a mighty host of eagles under Thorondor, destroying many of the dragons, including Encalagon the Black, largest and greatest among them. When at last the forces of the Dark Lord were defeated, Morgoth tried to sue for peace, but was instead forcibly captured, with his feet hewn from under him, before the Valar unhoused his spirit and sent it through the Door of Night into the Timeless Void, unable to return to Arda until the final battle of Dagor Dagorath at the end of the world. With Morgoth captured, the final two Silmarils were recovered by the Maya Eonwe, but even now, the surviving sons of Fëanor could not forego their vow, sneaking into the victorious camp to kill several guards and take possession of the jewels, at last fulfilling the Oath of Fëanor. Aware this was a suicide mission, Maedhros and Maglor quickly found themselves surrounded and were prepared for a fight to the death, but Eonwe instead allowed them to leave unharmed, so no more blood would be shed. Though the War of the Great Jewels was over and they were victorious, finally holding the Silmarils of their father, Maedhros and Maglor found no joy or peace, as they lost everything and committed so many evil deeds. The jewels deemed them unworthy and burned their hands, bringing only pain and misery. Unable to live with what they'd done, Maedhros threw himself and his jewel into a fiery chasm, while Maglor tossed his Silmaril into the ocean, living out his days singing songs of lament while he wandered aimlessly through Middle-earth. As the third Silmaril remained with Eärendil, who flew his ship through the sky, the ultimate fate of the three great jewels of Fëanor found one in the sky, one in the sea, and one in the earth. For centuries, the Valar did their best to avoid interfering in the affairs of the East, and once again were reminded why this was the right decision when they saw the consequences of the War of Wrath. In addition to the countless who died in the fighting and aftermath, the final battle was so devastating, Beleriand itself collapsed into the sea, issuing a pardon to the remaining Noldor of Middle-earth and an invitation to the Sindar. Many of the elves left for the Undying Lands, while others like High King Gil-galad, Galadriel, Celeborn, Elrond, and Oropher remained behind to found new homelands further east. As for the human houses that fought for the Valar, they were rewarded with the island of Numenor in the middle of the Sea of Belegire, founding a new glorious kingdom under Elros as their first ruler. As a consequence of pertaining to a half-elven line, the individual members of Eärendil's family were forced to choose whether they would prefer the ultimate fate of men or elves. Though most chose the immortality of elves, Elros became the only member of their family to that point that chose the life of a mortal human. Though Morgoth was defeated and could no longer directly influence the world, some of his orcs, trolls, dragons, balrogs, and other creatures fled into the east, as well as his lieutenant Sauron, who initially had a change of heart upon witnessing his master's defeat, and even offered his surrender to Eonwe. But upon learning he was to be taken west and judged by the Valar, he could not bring himself to display such humility and ultimately fled to eventually become the new Dark Lord of the Second and Third Ages. A special thanks to all those who contribute to CivilizationEx, like Sir Xavier, Defender of the Flame, Delacruz the Freed, Edingruir, Spicy Sky Frugron, and Galvira 8 Hands. If you'd like to help the channel, be sure to give a like, leave a comment, subscribe, and click on the links below, or else go to patreon.com/CivilizationEx, where you can gain early access to videos, vote on future content, and watch the Patreon-only series, Heroes of Lore and Legend.